Hey guys, thanks for coming back. I really appreciate you joining me today. For those who've subscribed, welcome back, and I'm glad that you were able to be notified. For those who are here for the first time, welcome, and hopefully you'll like the content and hit subscribe and the bell to be notified when I upload new content. I'm trying to upload every other day, which is easy to do over the Christmas break. But I am going back to school next week, so I don't know what it's going to look like starting next week. Um, so I wanted to find kind of a beginning. There's a lot to my story and a lot to what makes me me and someone who can speak as a peer from a peer support um, angle kind of thing. Um, as I've said before, that I did go to school, so obviously there's that, but I think it's a whole different, and I've heard from other people, it's a whole different um, kind of thing for those who've experienced something and can talk from their experience versus someone who has just learned from books and who hasn't experienced it. Um, when I've talked to people who've had children's aid workers, CS workers, they're like, I hear a lot of them say, "Well, who are you to tell me about parenting when you don't even have your own kids?" Because a lot of CS workers are young, they don't have their own kids, whatever, but they're not parents. So realistically, what I can see where they're coming from. It's not what, parenting, you can know a lot without being a parent, but you really can't grasp it until you've been there and been a true, like, been a parent to a child. I used to think I knew everything about parenting, and then I became a parent and then realized I knew nothing. I love my daughter to pieces, but I realized after giving birth to her, I knew nothing about being a parent. And it was learn as I go. The terrible twos, nothing. It's the troublesome threes. It's the threes that we had trouble with. They were terrible, 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 terrible. Threes, not twos, threes. Anyways, I love her to pieces though. We got through it. It was great. We survived it. So I kind of want to bring it back to, I guess, when I was 14. I don't want to drag this on too long, so there'll be lots of parts to this, but I'm gonna kind of go back to when I was, probably should go back further, but I'm gonna go back to when I was 14, because 14 was my first suicide attempt. I was sexually assaulted at school. I was still being abused by my parents at home, and was my first hospitalization. I went into foster care, and my first trip to what was then Cottage 5. It was a busy year for me. um, so, so Cottage 5 is the adolescent cottage at what was then Whitby Psychiatric Hospital, which is now been torn down and rebuilt and is on Ontario shores. But it was the short stay assessment unit at what was then Whitby Psychiatric Hospital. So I was there a total of 3 times, but that was my first time. And there's some things that I want people to understand because I want for the same things not to happen to them. So my first suicide attempt was really pathetic, really dumb. It was a small overdose. A few days later, I drank some rubbing alcohol. Again, that I didn't know at the time. I was really naive as a child, really dumb. But I had no idea that that also wouldn't, it says don't take more than 2 on a pill bottle, so, the whole bottle should kill me. No, that's not how that works. So it's good, but I was just really naive as a child. And the rubbing alcohol, That didn't do anything really to me either. It freaked out my mom because my mom ended up, I don't even remember how she ended up finding out, but she called my aunt who worked at a hospital. I don't know what she did, but she worked at a hospital. They told me to drink milk and go to bed. So that's what I did. I ended up going and being admitted into Lakeridge Health on the children's unit because I was 14. And which is really weird because I remember writing in my diary not more than a few weeks before all of that happened, saying, I'm too smart to try to kill myself. And then I did. So I don't know if I just saw it coming or what, but apparently I wasn't too smart to try that. So I ended up being admitted to, this is many years ago, so I don't remember a lot of detail, but I ended up getting admitted to the children's ward. And from there, they ended up transferring me over to what was then Cottage 5. And I spent a month there. What's important to know is coming up. So while I was there, they are very invasive. They made me do a strip search when I got there, and I was 14 years old, and they didn't know at the time, but I don't think it would have mattered, but I was a sexual abuse survivor. So doing a strip search is very invasive. One of the other things they do is they take like 8 vials of blood, which is a lot for a child. It seemed like a lot at the time. They had me sent for CAT scans and they did like every test in the book. So they're very thorough, which is good. Like looking back, it's good. At the time, it was very overwhelming. They kept a really close eye on me. I remember sitting in a room that was on a cement block that was carpeted. I sat at the window and cried a lot and just counted the cars that would come up the road. I was never a great sleeper. I'm still not a great sleeper. I didn't know where I was. I didn't really know what was going on. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just knew that I was in this strange place, and I had nightmares about it before I went because this is a psychiatric hospital, and there's scary places with scary people in it. And I was 14 and very, as I said, very naive. I had led quite the sheltered life. So I became very attached to one of the staff. She was very interesting. She was very sweet, but very interesting. She let me brush her hair and all that kind of stuff. We played cards, and I think it was cards and stuff all the time. And I remember that the psychologist, and I don't know who the psychologist was at the time, but he brought me into his office one day and he sat me down and he's like, okay, Crystal, well, my name wasn't Crystal at the time. That's a whole other story. But he's like, okay, so these are just my own personal notes. I'm going to ask you some questions. We're going to talk about some things and, you know, that kind of thing. He's not, whatever you talk about, it's just between us. And I'm like, okay. And then I don't remember exactly what he asked me because I ended up dissociating after that. I just remember telling him, I don't know. I just know that I don't like it. So I know it was something to do with the sexual abuse that was happening. And then he asked me more questions about it. And then I thought everything was over with. I go out, and not long later, I get a visit from the police, and I get a visit from the children's aid, and these so-called personal notes of his were not so personal. So I think they've gotten better. And I know in my mental health and addictions worker training and my social service worker training, we are very clear, and I make sure that I'm very clear that you know exactly who I'm going to be telling what to, especially because of my own experiences, and I will not tell a soul. If I say I'm not going to tell anyone, nobody's going to know, because of what I went through. I don't like surprises, especially as a trauma survivor. I do not like surprises. I do not like especially the police and children's aid showing up. And then the police sat me down and they wanted to hear the stories about what happened. And there was just a lot of stories. And because it happened over like 5 years. And then I think for like 4 or 5 years. So there was a lot of stories in 4 or 5 years. And I learned very quickly to hate the word specific. Because the cop kept saying, "Can you be more specific?" I'm like, no, I don't want to be. And it was really nice because that one worker that I really liked at the hospital would sit with me. I didn't realize till later when she told me that apparently I was squeezing the crap out of her hand because I was so upset and so nervous and just beside myself that I was having to talk about this at all. So my abuser was arrested. We'll get into who that was later, but my abuser was arrested. He was only 2 years older than me. So he was taken to, well, I don't know what they call it. I can't remember now. I should know this. But he was taken into custody, and a couple weeks later they sent me home. I guess now that he's not in the house, and well, obviously it was my brother. Now that he's not in the house, and I've talked about it, apparently everything's okay now. Well, that's not how that works. Nobody did any counseling. Nobody really set me up with any counseling. Nobody did anything. So in my mind, nothing had changed. Especially since I was still living with my parents, and nobody put two and two together that they were just as much of a problem as my brother was, just a different problem. So I went home and I was still suicidal. My parents acted really weird, and they're like, took all my stuff out of my room and were like forcing me to come down and eat dinner, even though I was like, no, I'm not hungry, I don't want to come down. And they were like, well, but you had to at the hospital, so you can come and sit with us now. Before that, they didn't give a shit whether I ate with them or not. I'm sorry, but they didn't. They made me stand at the counter to eat. They gave me spoons. They wouldn't have cared if I lived or died, and all of a sudden they want me to come and join them at the table. No, I'm not going to do it just because they want me to. So it was a power struggle, yeah. I was 14 years old. Of course it was a power struggle. But that's not how you get a 14-year-old to listen to you. Because the more you fight with a 14-year-old, the more they're going to fight back. This is why I've not had problems with my 20-year-old, because we've learned how to get along. Again, as I said before, I did everything opposite of my parents, and we've gotten along really well. So I ended up back in the kids ward of the hospital, and because I either attempted or threatened to attempt suicide. I'm not sure which one it was, because I kept doing silly things like taking pills and doing stupid stuff like that. So I don't remember if I actually did that or if I threatened to. And while I was there that time, that is when I talked to Children's Aid. I talked to the doctor or the nurses or somebody, but then I got a hold of Children's Aid and I spoke with a worker because they were all confused. They're like, well, the brother's gone, so why are you so upset? And I told them, I'm like, I don't want to go home. I don't want to live at home. And there's like, well, there's nothing we can do. And I'm like, well, I don't understand. And finally, they pretty much gave me the words that I needed to say for them to come and take me out of the home, which was they told me that I needed to let them know that if they sent me home, that I would kill myself. So that's what I told them. Like, that's what you want me to say? That's what I'm going to tell you. Because I'm just going to go home and threaten to kill myself again anyway. So it wasn't really that much of a lie. Because I was so unhappy at home because there was so much abuse going on. So that's when I got moved into my foster home. And I think for today, that is where we will end it. So, what I really want people to learn from this little bit: don't do stupid things, don't overdose, don't take things, try to get help, reach out. Um, um, so reach out if you can, and then um, make sure that if somebody says it's their personal notes, that you clarify with them what that means. And you clarify what confidentiality means and to what extent that means, and how or what purposes will they break it for. Usually it's for things like child abuse. And if there's a court order, if um, there's sexual abuse from a healthcare provider or a doctor or that kind of thing. Make sure that you clarify what they are. I should know off by heart, but I haven't had to deal with this. And I tend to keep things as confidential and quiet as possible. I might share, like if I worked with an agency, like when I worked at the shelter, I share with my team, but I make sure that people know that. And most people who are going to a shelter understand that. But on an admission or when I talk to somebody, I will let them know that we share everything with our team to make sure that you're getting the best care. So that's important. And um, yeah, so I just want to make sure that that was touched upon so that people understand what their rights are and about confidentiality, because your information is private and it's important that it stays private, and you have rights if people break that confidentiality. Um, Not that there is any way I could have proved that, because I don't think that it was videotaped or audio taped, that session. And it would have been his word against mine, and I was just a crazy kid, so what would I know? Because that's a mentality that most people have. We'll get into some of that later. The whole notion that, oh no, it's all in your head. Because, as I said, I've had a lot of experiences, which is why I have such a heart for people who um, are going through a hard time and who have the stigma and the who have mental health issues or who have a hard time, because I've been there. I get it. So I hope that this has been helpful in some way, and if it has, again, subscribe and hit that bell so that you'll be notified the next time I upload. And uh, take care and respect yourself. And until next time.